Yeah.
Did you call him again?
Who's calling him?
The chair, Chris is the president. That's where my
Sounds like my kids. Can you play my microphone, please?
You know,
Don't we have an iPhone?
try to stick.
It's in here. And of course, the first order of business is approving our student achievement minutes, and I will entertain a motion from our minutes from May 14th as well.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please note by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The motion carries. And of course, if you need me to, this is also my sorority sister. I'm on a roll today. If you need me to stop and let you know, maybe just let me know. Okay, perfect. Sorry, the recording isn't working, so we'll try to make sure she gets what she needs from us. So we will have to talk a little bit louder so that she can hear everything she needs to take note of. All right, I will officially turn it over to you, Dr. Wilson. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Good afternoon. Thanks. We are very excited today to have the opportunity to present to you Start Strong, where we focus on transitions from pre-K to K and from 8th to 9th grade. So while we recognize there are other transitions, our focus today are these two transition periods. I have joining me today Mr. Drew Cook, Assistant Superintendent of Academics, and Michelle Woodson, Assistant Superintendent of Student Support Services. And we also have Christy Dickerson, who will share some words with us, who attended our Early Learning Summit. So we're very excited to have her here with us today. And Dawn Dawson would normally be here, but she is out ill, and she wanted me to know that she's never missed a board presentation. She's very sad that she couldn't be here, but she is out sick.
Oh, my.
And she probably is listening right now.
She probably is.
When we think about our desired outcomes for this presentation, that we really want to focus on 3 key outcomes. The first is to really highlight the critical role that strong transitions play from pre-K to kindergarten and from 8th grade to 9th grade in setting the foundation for long-term academic success and support of student well-being. These transitions are vital in ensuring that students are ready and supported as they move along their educational journey. Next, we'll showcase our Early Learning Summit. That was something we shared last spring as something that was happening, and it actually has occurred, and we want to provide you with an update of our first pilot of our Early Learning Summit. And finally, we will explore strategies that Wake County Public School System has in place to support 9th grade success and ensure long-term fulfillment of our students. By focusing on these strategies, we are committed to helping students thrive not just in high school, but throughout their lives. That as we think about the work that we are doing, our focus of our work with Start Strong Transitions from pre-K to kindergarten aligns with our strategic plan through 2 key priorities. Priority 1, knowledge, student knowledge and skills. We're committed to delivering a high-quality instructional core. And our second, under priority 2, student dispositions and well-being, we prioritize behavioral health by fostering a safe and inclusive learning environment. So we want to share the alignment with our strategic plan. That additionally, as we think about the goals of our strategic plan, we have to have measures to measure our success. And when we think about the impacted measurements, that when we look at our student graduation, as we think about starting strong, as students enter 9th grade, the goal is to get them graduated and on time and ready for life. As we think about proficiency, that ensuring that our students are meeting the levels of proficiency as they transition from pre-K through 12th grade, and then reflecting on our metrics around our growth, ensuring that we grow each student, no matter where you come in, that we're ensuring continuous growth. That as we think about setting the stage and think back to our own experiences in transitions, that we want to help make transitions as smoothly as possible for students so that we're focused on not only their academic well-being, but their social emotional well-being as well. And so as we think about believing in starting strong, it's essential at every critical transition that we begin to think about how we support students as they enter from pre-K to kindergarten, and especially as they enter 9th grade. That we chose these 2 areas of entry because they help project someone's success as you travel through elementary school, starting out strong in kindergarten, and then as you enter high school. And so these are the 2 areas that we want to focus on. That we look at, there are other transitions, but these are the most critical that we want to focus on for this school year. And so we want to start with our Start Strong aspect of our Early Learning Summit.
All right, I am going to try to do Dawn Dawson justice, so I'm grateful for the opportunity.
And you're
to
right, she probably is listening.
I know for sure she's listening. I want to first thank you just for the opportunity to spend some time with you today, and really to make sure that we're circling back on something we promised we'd give you some information on in May. I also want to just take a moment to make sure that I recognize some of Dawn's team that is here. So Jenna Ramsey is over here. She's a director. Kylie Brown, director. And Cam Ellis, we're going to talk about this summit, did a lot of the planning behind the scenes. And I just certainly want to make sure we give her credit for some of what has occurred. So go to the next slide. Thank you. I got it. The goal of the summit was to promote shared understandings of school readiness and to advocate for vertical alignment to enhance early childhood education effectiveness. We wanted to make sure that we were supporting the transition to kindergarten and to establish early learning partnerships. It is our first ever learning summit, and it occurred on July 23rd, and I did have the opportunity to attend. It was outstanding. The sessions were focused on engaging participants in vertical alignment and supporting families with the transition to kindergarten and effective partnerships. Collaboration was a key focus of all of the sessions. We had experts from the field share best practices, and teachers engaged in interactive workshops, providing practical recommendations, and developing hands-on tools to use in the classrooms and to share with families to support the transition to kindergarten even at home. The summit emphasized the importance of collaboration amongst teachers, principals, caregivers, and community members. As a part of the summit, a panel of experts provided tangible examples of best practices for teachers to consider when partnering to support the transition to kindergarten. The Wake County Public Schools Office of Early Learning and academics team and community partners from Telamon, Head Start, and the Department of Public Instruction worked together to develop content for the Early Learning Aligned Summit. And Dr. Anthony Broughton, a national researcher in the field of early childhood education, provided motivation and meaningful dialogue to supports and efforts. What that was inclusive of pedagogy through engagement, high expectations, and collaboration. And I will say there might have been some dancing at the same time. So as we reflect on the Early Learning Summit, it's evident that the event left a lasting impression on our educators. One participant captured the essence of the presentation by saying, the presenters were all knowledgeable and brought different superpowers to the table. This speaks to the diverse expertise that enriched our discussions. Another participant encouraged us to keep pouring into our educators because we're all trailblazers. This powerful reminder underscores the importance of continued support and innovation in our work. And finally, many of the summit left us feeling inspired, with one attendee sharing, "Today was a great day and a great way to get re-energized prior to the start of the new school year." This quote perfectly captures the rejuvenating spirit of the summit as we head into another year of dedication to our littlest learners. These voices highlighted the impact of our collective efforts and the enthusiasm that drives us forward. So here's a little bit of a look at our numbers. The impact of our Early Learning Summit is clear from the feedback and data collected. We had 77 teachers in attendance, and the results show significant progress in several key areas. First, we saw a 30% increase in teachers' knowledge of pre-K to kindergarten alignment, which is crucial for ensuring consistency and continuity in early education. In fact, by the end of the summit, 100% of the attendees felt fully knowledgeable about that alignment, which is a testament to the effectiveness of our content. Additionally, 95% of the teachers expressed a strong interest in further collaboration between pre-K and kindergarten teachers. This enthusiasm is critical as 90% of them plan to continue these collaborative efforts beyond the summit. The key takeaways for our teachers included a deeper understanding of pre-K and kindergarten alignment, the importance of consistent routines and planning, strong family communication, and fostering collaborative support within their teams. These metrics not only highlight the immediate impact of the summit, but also set the stage for ongoing collaboration and improvement in our early learning practices as we move forward. So what are some of our next steps? As we move forward, we want to think about how we're focused on expanding our impact from the Early Learning Summit. First, we plan to expand participation to include more teachers and representatives from community-based childcare and preschool programs. We'll introduce kindergarten readiness workshops at more elementary schools, giving caregivers and children hands-on opportunities to explore kindergarten learning. We want to make sure we strengthen teaching practices, and we'll facilitate collaborative planning and peer observations between pre-K and kindergarten teachers. We'll also share resource folders from the summit, ensuring that all educators have access to those valuable resources. And lastly, we'll support community partnerships by organizing transition events in community spaces throughout Wake County. We hope that these steps will help us continue to support early learners and their successful transitions. So we want to talk just for a moment about our families and opportunities for our families as well. We're committed to providing a range of opportunities for families to engage and to support their students in that transition to kindergarten. Some of those include, we have free in-person and virtual sessions focused on kindergarten readiness, parents as partners, and empowering children in their transition to kindergarten. We also offer a free blast off to kindergarten session. These informative sessions are a collaboration between the Office of Early Learning, the elementary team, student assignment, and magnet programs. This team also offers this training to our NC Pre-K community partners as a why to ensure that other pre-K families who are associated with NC Pre-K in our community also receive this information. For students served in our classroom-based programs, teachers are also provided a family school partnership workshop that focuses on transition processes and outlines what to expect in the transition process and how to prepare their child for that transition. Many special events are also offered, including a kickoff to kindergarten at Marbles, which is always a fan favorite. The traditional session will be held on Saturday, August 17th from 9 to 5 p.m. The year-round session was held on June 20th, and on June 20th we had 582 participants. Parents also have the opportunities to participate in individual school open houses and incoming kindergarten family events. These offerings are all a part of our community, our commitment to our community, and to ensuring that every child and family has the support they need to start strong in kindergarten. So I'm going to move to our kickoff to kindergarten. Specifically, the kickoff to kindergarten event received an overwhelmingly positive feedback from parents and children alike. According to our survey, 96% of parents reported that their child had a positive and enriching experience during the event. During this event, families board a bus, serve themselves a delicious lunch, and listen to and engage in interactive story time performances, morning meeting, PE, and music classes. There are kindergarten teachers and principals there to ask questions to support. Resource tables are also available for families to connect with and learn more about community programs and agencies. Parents shared that their children learned important skills, gained valuable insights about what it's like to be a kindergartner. One parent even noted, "My child learned a lot about what it's like to be in kindergarten and saw the fun part, like riding on a bus and story time and lunch." Another mentioned how their child learned about the lunch line process, safety at crosswalks, and even got a library card. The benefits to parents as well. Many found that the event helped ease their child's anxieties. As one parent expressed it, it helped getting over anxiety with riding on a bus and knowing how she could get the lunch. Another highlighted how the event promoted learning and a love for reading and stated, "I really loved all the promotion for learning and loving of reading." This event is a wonderful way to help children and families experience what kindergarten will be like and start to think about the routines and the structures that are in existence there. This background knowledge helps increase students' confidence as they start kindergarten, and these resources demonstrate the impact of the kickoff to kindergarten event in preparation for our youngest learners and their families for a smooth and confident transition into student life. So as we kind of conclude this section about thinking about pre-K to kindergarten transition, I'm excited to introduce Ms. Christy Dickerson, a kindergarten teacher at Lincoln Heights. Christy holds a bachelor's degree in biology and a master's degree in elementary education from NC State University. Before becoming a teacher, she spent 20 years as a cytogenic, am I saying that? Cytogenetic, there we go, technologist, and she brings her rich science background to life through the school's environmental magnet theme. For several years, Christy has been a key partner with the Office of Early Learning, offering hands-on workshops for families to support the transition to kindergarten. She's also taken the initiative to create a transition night for incoming kindergartners and established a regional professional learning team for kindergarten teachers to foster collaboration. Christy is a valued partner in our efforts and was an enthusiastic participant in the Early Learning Alignment Summit. Today, she's here to share her experiences from the summit, what she learned, and how she will implement her knowledge. So please join me in welcoming Christy.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me and listening to what I have to say today. I really appreciate this opportunity. I was really excited when I heard that there was going to be an Early Learning Alignment Summit. I heard from Cam Ellis. Wrong Cam. Cam Ellis, because I have had an opportunity to partner with her on several things for transitioning students to kindergarten. So when I heard, I was very excited because I do have a deep passion for helping kids and families transition to kindergarten, because I do feel like it's what sets the tone for a family's entrance into public education. And I think that if we do it well, then they will already have trust in our system. And I also love collaborating with other teachers. It's one of my favorite things to do. I like to hear how they're doing things, and so that I can make sure that I'm doing the best methods for my students, for academic and socially. And I want to make sure that every student in Wake County has a successful transition to kindergarten, because it is so, so important. So I'll tell you a little bit about the day. It started with our keynote speaker, Dr. Broughton, or Mr. B. I don't know if you've ever had a chance to see his YouTube channel, but he has so much energy. I think he has more energy than some of my kindergartners do. But from the very beginning of the day, we were up and dancing and singing and moving. And for me, it was just a great reaffirmation that kindergarten should be up and moving and dancing and singing and enjoying our day. That the magic of kindergarten lies in the fun of it. And if kids think that learning is fun, then they're going to love school. And if they love school, then they're going to become lifelong learners. And I think that's what we all want for all of these kids. So that's how the day started. He was really great at motivating us to be both purposeful and playful with our students. And he had lots of great little ideas of ways that we could add that into our classroom. I also loved the collaboration that we got to do with the other kindergarten teachers and pre-K teachers. We sat at round tables and were able to just share ideas. I got to hear a lot, because I don't have a background in pre-K, so I got to hear a lot about what they do in pre-K. I honestly didn't know that much. So I will say I was super impressed by the explicit instruction they give around emotional maturity and naming emotions and problem solving. They teach explicitly so many great life skills and school readiness skills. Standing in a line, they teach that explicitly. How to take turns, how to share, a lot of the things that we kind of almost expect students to come in with. It's not an accident that they can do those things. Those are explicitly taught in pre-K, and especially on Wake County pre-K. We also got to kind of use one of the learning objectives and come up with ways that we could help families help their child with the transition. Ours specifically was solving social problems, so it was really fun to collaborate and hear what pre-K teachers had to say and we had to say about how we can encourage families to work on solving social problems with their student. I definitely left wishing that every 4-year-old could go to a Wake County public pre-K for sure. And then the day ended with a panel of experts, which I just think reaffirmed to me the importance that Wake County places on this transition. And I really got to learn about a lot of the resources that we have. There were people from DPI, Head Start, Jenna Ramsey was there from the Office of Early Learning, Dr. Broughton was on the panel. We even had a principal that kind of spoke about what they do at their school to transition students. A couple of the action steps that I'm hoping to take back to my school are, I'm going to discuss with my principal putting a date on our calendar to invite area pre-Ks into our school so students can kind of get a little look at what the actual school looks like. We could take them on a tour to the cafeteria, to the media center, the gym, the classrooms, and even interact with some kindergarten students, so that anxiety level may go down and their excitement level may go up, because that's where we want them to be at the beginning of kindergarten. I'd also love to have more opportunities to collaborate with pre-K teachers. I'd love to discuss common language around emotional health and how they name emotions, And then what are those next steps once they finish their job? What would they recommend to take us to the next step and that emotional understanding? And I would also love conversations around aligning curriculum with what they do and what we do so that that transition is even more smooth. So thank you guys so much for letting me come. I am very passionate about this subject, so I was excited to come and speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christy, and we certainly appreciate her being here today and her commitment to our students and our families. And at this time,
I see you, Ms. Mahaffey.
I know.
Do you want to interrupt now and have your question?
No, I just want to say, every day my kid is late to carpool because she has to stop and give Ms. Dickerson a hug. That's the testament to her expertise.
all right.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Ms. Mahaffey.
And we're going to turn it over to Mr. Cook to talk about the critical role of ninth grade transition.
Thank you very much. So if you think it's fun in kindergarten,
I don't know if you can top Emily getting out
you should
there.
check out the ninth grade class and wait.
I don't know if you can top Ms. Mahaffey.
Singing.
Both equally important in terms of transition, and certainly I think these are critically important topics in their own right. And so we will just shift for just a few minutes and talk about the 8-9 transition. Which, this is there's a decades-long amount of research that points out, statistically speaking, the critical role of the ninth grade transition, both to high school success, but maybe more importantly, to post-secondary career and life success as well. And so, and I want to point out up front, much like Michelle and Ms. Dickerson did, we're going to share with you some data, we're going to share with you some current practices, but also, and we're going to highlight some of the good work that's occurred. But I want to point out that that good work has gotten us the data that I think we all recognize and agree is shown by our strategic plan. We must and we can do better, and we will do better. And so we also will highlight some practices at the district level and in schools that we want to take from being best practice, quote unquote, we use that term a lot, to systemically implement it across every school and every classroom. And I think that'll be certainly our focus moving forward. And I think that'll be the focal point of the second presentation we have after this. So as we look at the role of the ninth grade transition, some of this is maybe a little bit commonsensical, but I do want to spend a few minutes talking about why the ninth grade transition is so pivotal. It's a critical year, as we all know, that often sets the tone for a student's entire high school experience. And unfortunately, it's also a year where many challenges, developmentally speaking, peak. And I want to point out, make clear, this is not a Wake County Public School System issue. This is a national issue, but the Wake County Public School System is not immune, and I think we know and recognize that. First, course failure and retention rates are highest in ninth grade when compared to any other year. Students who struggle early often find it difficult to recover, leading to higher retention rates. Absenteeism, which we spent a lot of time talking about and focused on in the last year or two, especially post-pandemic, also reaches its peak during ninth grade. We recognize this demands urgent attention when we're talking about attendance rates. Unfortunately, we also see a similar trend with suspension rates, which soar in the ninth grade. This highlights the need, of course, for proactive disciplinary measures and supportive interventions to keep students on track. Ninth graders, probably not surprisingly, often or as a group have the lowest GPA average across all the high school grade spans. And finally, this year is a period of significant growth and development. Students face social, emotional, intellectual, developmental challenges that require really strong and targeted support systems. And I think we all know and recognize one size does not fit all. We know that explicitly in the ninth grade, given the vast range of needs that our kids have. So why is the ninth grade pivotal? It's because it's a year where the right support can make a huge difference between students thriving and getting off on the right foot for years ahead versus struggling throughout high school and beyond. So, kind of a positive approach to this challenge, and some would call it a problem, we would prefer to look at it as a positive opportunity. And so when we're talking about starting strong, this slide kind of points out the power of a successful ninth grade transition. First, in terms of academic achievement, Success in ninth grade sets the tone for academic performance down the road. Students who perform well in the ninth grade are more likely to maintain high grades throughout high school, leading to better opportunities for college admissions, scholarships, future career opportunities. In terms of graduation rates, there's a strong correlation between ninth grade performance and a four-year graduation rate. Students who start strong in the ninth grade are much more likely to stay on track, complete their high school education, and graduate on time. The reality is if a student is retained and not promoted in that ninth grade year, they are far less likely to graduate on time than their peers in that same cohort. In terms of college readiness, a successful ninth grade year, not surprisingly, prepares students for the rigor of higher education, mastering essential academic skills, critical thinking, problem solving, effective communication. Students are better equipped to succeed in college-level coursework and standardized tests like the SAT or ACT. And that's why it's so critical. That's why principals like Nolan Bryant and our middle school principals often work closely together. It's important for kids in the ninth grade to start off in the right courses. We know that access to AP, IB, college-level coursework often doesn't come about in volume until 11th and 12th grade, but we can set the tone and provide the opportunity through enrollment in honors level coursework, for example, in the ninth grade. And it's absolutely vital that we're doing that consistently across schools and across the district, and so that's part of the support that we work at the district level to help provide the schools in terms of guidance to ensure that a student who makes an A in an 8th grade English class, for example, and maybe makes a 4 or 5 on an EOG, there should be no sign-up. It should be automatic. You will be in 9th grade honors English. And you have to opt out and jump through hoops to get out rather than having to jump through hoops to get in. And that's been a pretty significant shift, I think, within our district over the last 5 to 10 years in a very positive way. But I think we know and recognize we've got work left to be done in that regard. Social emotional well-being. Success in 9th grade contributes to students' overall well-being and sense of belonging. Students who feel academically and socially connected are more likely to engage in school activities, form positive relationships with their peers and teachers, and develop a strong support network. And that's why you see aims and goals in our new strategic plan that highlight the importance of that. In terms of future opportunities, a successful 9th grade year opens doors to a wide range, including advanced coursework, as I just mentioned, extracurriculars, internships, leadership roles. These experiences not only enhance academic and personal growth, but also position students for success long-term down the road. And speaking of that long-term success, 9th grade lays the foundation for long-term success and achievement. Students who start strong are more likely to pursue higher education, secure rewarding careers, and become active, productive members of society, which ultimately, of course, is our goal as public educators. So overall, a successful 9th grade year is critical for establishing positive academic habits, building a solid foundation, and also setting students on a path towards lifelong success and fulfillment. So with that context and kind of background showing the importance of this transition, I'm going to share a little bit of data. First, when we talk about the importance of 9th grade, one of the critical factors is the promotion of students based on credits earned. In Wake County, promotion to the next grade level is contingent on students earning the necessary credits, as it is across the state of North Carolina. I want to pause here and highlight this. This is a significant change from the pre-K 8 dynamic. It is a little bit more black and white and cut and dry. To be more specific, high school students, and we've got language in State Board of Education policy that say very explicitly, shall be promoted by attaining credits that are earned through successful completion of specific courses. In Wake County and across the state, in most high schools, that means if you want to be promoted from grade 9 to grade 10, that's English 1, that's 2 credits in the areas of math, science, or social studies, and 3 additional credits for a total of 6 credits earned in that freshman year. Now, one of the potential benefits of the 4x4 block schedule, where you've got the fall, spring, is that we do see a pretty significant number of students who may not start the year as a 10th grader after having been retained, but then are promoted mid-year because of their accrual of credits in the fall of that second year in high school. So that's one positive aspect of the 4x4 block. As you can see from the data, and by the way, for context here, I just want to point out there's a couple of different ways that districts can calculate 9th grade retention rates. But I think this will show very clearly the trends over time. For context here, the district's K-12 retention rate this past year in 23-24 was 2.3%. And for additional context, in this same year, on this last data point that you see where it's showing 6.8% retention rate for 9th grade, it was 0.3% for 8th grade. So this highlights by far the number of retentions, comparatively speaking, in the 9th grade is substantially higher than any other grade level across the spectrum. And by the way, that is not an anomaly that's unique to Wake County. This is systemic across the country and certainly across the state. You do see some positive trends here pre-pandemic. One of the next slide will point out graduation rates, and as we mentioned, there's a strong correlation rate between increasing graduation rates and decreasing 9th grade retention rates. And so there was a lot of intentional work going back to 2013-14 in that time frame with that Vision 2020 strategic plan, many will recall, focused on a 95% college and career-ready graduation rate. We knew there was no way to get close to that unless we saw better performance, lower retention rates, better promotion rates in the 9th grade. And that bore itself out over time with increasing graduation rates that we'll point out a little bit on the next slide. I also, though, want to point out, and it's obvious, the spike that you see, not surprisingly, in the middle of the pandemic. And I'll point out, when you look at the 2021 data, first of all, that roughly 3% dip that you see there, that 2021 group was based on fall of 2020. So if you recall, the pandemic hits in the spring of 20. So freshmen in the spring of their first year would then become sophomores in that 2021 year. And quite frankly, because the school year ended abruptly in March and districts across the country, including Wake, were kind of scrambling to catch kids up, there were a lot of students that, through grace and flexibility, that we use that term a lot, that quite frankly, erring on the side of caution, not wanting to over-retain kids in that last quarter of that school year. That's why you likely see a little bit of a dip in that first year of the pandemic. Now, the jump comes in 21-22. That's the group that would have been retained after 2021, which was the full year of remote or hybrid instruction that took place. So that was probably the most obviously impactful in terms of more typical instruction that was provided. And by the way, that spike is similar to spikes that we see at the state level and across the country. And so you see that rate start to come back down, but I think importantly, it's not back down to the pre-pandemic lows of around 5 or 6%. So that is concerning, and it's one of the reasons why we've got some work to do to address and tackle that issue. And then I mentioned four-year graduation rates. Essentially you see a correlation here as those retention rates drop. Usually 3 or 4 years later, that will manifest itself with some increase in graduation rates. And I do want to highlight here, a lot of times we get caught kind of in percentages. That 8 or 9 percentage point gain in that decade leading up to 2023 is clearly significant. But what that translates into in terms of real students and individual people, in a class of about 14,000 ninth graders that enter in one of those years, for example, the difference between the early 2000s norm of around 80% graduation rates and now what has become a little flat, and we've got work to do to move that number up as part of our next strat plan. If the new norm is somewhat around that 90% level, that's about 1,200 students a year that are now graduating regularly in the Wake County Public School System that previously, in an 80% graduation rate, were not. And that you could quantify that in terms of future earnings, career stability, post-secondary access, all of those things. And that does not happen without some solid improvement in growth and reduction to those ninth grade retention rates that we were talking about. We know that research is very clear. Students who finish their ninth grade year on track, meaning they pass more of their core classes, are about 3.5 times more likely to graduate from high school compared to their peers. That stat underscores the importance of the foundational skills and habits that students develop during that freshman year. A couple of things I do want to point out. I'm going to go back for just a second. again, in the name of kind of sober reality and transparency. That last column that you see there, and I don't think it would be surprising, but it's still unfortunate and reflects the work that needs to be done. What you don't see reflected here that I'm going to call out are subgroup performance in these areas. That 6.8%, while it reflects a reduction going back to the previous 2 years, about 81% of that 6.8% that will retain are either Hispanic or Black students. And I don't think I need to say any more in terms of that 81% not reflecting the demographic makeup of ninth graders across the district. And so I wanted to pause for a second and call out that reality, because sometimes that gets lost in the overall data. And I think part of what our responsibility is moving forward, and we'll speak about this with the learning model a little bit moving forward, is how we provide differentiated, targeted support, both in terms of core instruction, but also through intervention, remediation, credit, and objective recovery programs that we'll talk more about in just a few minutes. So thank you for letting me go back for just a second. So speaking of that targeted support, this really does emphasize, I think, the importance of providing support and resources to students during this critical period to ensure they have the tools and assistance needed to overcome challenges and thrive academically and socially. I want to be clear, there's probably a lot of other strategies that Mr. Bryant and other high schools and middle schools deploy when it comes to that 8-9 transition. These represent specific focal points for the 24-25 school year for our team and for Dr. Johnson and Ms. Mountford and their teams and those regional support teams at the secondary level to really zero in and focus on. So transitioning obviously is a critical period. These are areas of support. You see student support and engagement, collaboration planning, monitoring and intervention. When we're talking about student and support and engagement, we're coordinating academic planning efforts to help students navigate their coursework effectively. We want to continue to offer summer bridge, induction, and orientation programs, which our high schools typically offer in the summertime. Additionally, mentoring and peer support programs to provide ongoing encouragement and guidance. That's another area where, and when we're talking about monitoring, we want to do a better job at the district level. If Nolan Bryant or other principals have some best practices that they see positive affect from, it's our responsibility to identify those best practices and make them systemic best practices and not variable potentially from school to school based on perhaps the experience level of a principal, a dean, or a counselor. So I think that's something that we want to call out moving forward. We also will continue to facilitate district-wide collaboration between high schools and middle schools every fall and winter. We set up coordinated joint meetings with counselors, assistant principals from instruction at the high school level to talk through transition strategies. Teams at both the middle and high school work together to address those challenges. We've got some plans to create some tighter parameters around what that looks like. And then finally, when we're talking about monitoring and intervention, that will be a focus. We'll be coordinating intervention efforts, including expanding opportunities for credit recovery to ensure that students who may struggle have the support they need to stay on track. Data analysis, accountability systems will help us identify and address those issues more promptly. And I'm going to transition to this next slide to allow two folks that I would deem experts in this area, Dr. Brian Johnson, who, as you may know, is our senior director, one of our senior directors for secondary regional achievement and school support, and also you'll hear firsthand from Principal Nolan Bryant from Cary High School, just to give you a little bit of a closer look at some of the work that's happening in our high schools.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here today. It's a pleasure to come and talk with you about our targeted support for this transition time. As you heard from Mr. Cook, ninth grade is an exciting time, but also can be a very challenging time for our students. And we have to think about what can we do to support these students at a higher level. And there's many things that we do as a county, but one of the things we do is help our students through our online learning platform. And through our online learning platform, students have the availability to log in two different ways. We have a credit-bearing side, and we have what's called a objective recovery side, what's called blended learning side of that. So the blended learning side is what I'll talk about first. Blended learning is where teachers and students have immediate access to this resource. If there are skill gaps, if there's objectives they need to recover, if there is a grade level before in the content area they need to recover or help build their skill gaps, or if they need to accelerate, They have real-time ability to do that. Teachers have access to assign those to groups, to individuals, to assist them with those skill gaps or with that acceleration process. And they can, again, do that real-time in the objective recovery piece. The credit recovery side is our credit bearing login side, and that is for students who have failed a course. So if you think about the numbers and the statistics that Mr. Cook has talked about with the failure rate of ninth graders and thinking about the importance of making sure they get back on track, we have to find a way to help them be successful. And so that's what we do with the credit bearing side. So through the credit recovery, students are able to recover a failed course, and they will not get a grade for that, but they will get a passing on their transcripts. So it'll show up as a P on their transcripts. So they can recover the credit and still move along and stay on cohort, and that will assist them also with the graduation rates and so on and so forth with those statistics. Another thing that we use this for is for monitoring and intervention. We talked already about how to keep students on track. For example, if I have a ninth grade math student who has some skill gaps missing from eighth grade, we can actually assign them some eighth grade math skill gaps and help build that as we still serve them with the standards they're supposed to be receiving in the ninth grade as well. So there's a lot of ways that we can utilize intervention to make them successful with their outcomes. As of right now, this past year we had over 4,000 courses that students had credit recovery on, and we had over 80,000 objectives that students recovered as well, real-time objectives to really help them stay on track. So it's a success, and we're looking at also expanding that and really helping utilize this resource to help kids as much as we can. And to talk a little bit about that today, we do have a principal from Cary High School, Nolan Bryant, here to share some of his expertise and his use of this resource.
Sitters.
Yeah, you can sit.
Whatever you're comfortable with. Doing anything. It's been,
Can't hold it. You want to hold it?
I'd rather not, if that's okay.
Sure. Sorry. I try to ask people to hold their questions to the end, but thank you for joining us. And Ms. Evans has questions that she can't wait to ask.
Just a clarifying question about what you just said. You said 80,000 objective recovery.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you,
I can
and if you want to do this after Principal Bryant speaks, but can you parse that out? What is that? How many students are you serving? Because the 80,000 recovery is not 80,000 students,
No,
of
ma'am.
course.
No, ma'am.
So just if that's my question, but if you want to.
So let's say there's a student that is in an English course, and they are covering 1.01, 1.02 objectives in the class. And it's time for me as a teacher to move on to 103. If those students have failed those objectives and do not have proficiency in those objectives, I can, as the teacher, assign those two objectives to that student to help. They can do it at home, they can do it in class, they can do it during remediation time to help build those skill gaps while I still am delivering the content on the right pathway, on the right timeline. So the objectives are, there's 80,000, that's not 80,000 students. There could be one student that has many objectives that they have to recover from multiple courses because of possible information, knowledge, or skill gaps that they may have.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
well, good afternoon. I'm Nolan Bryant, a proud principal of Cary High School, entering my 30th year of service for Wake County Public School
Thank
System.
you for your service.
I'm still standing. And this is my 12th year I'm starting at Cary High School. So I'm happy to be here to share some of the things we're doing at Cary that are aligned with the work of Dr. Wilson Norman's team. And I just want to take a moment just to kind of give a shout out to both Dr. Wilson Norman's team and Superintendent Taylor for really creating a space where we can begin to have a little bit stronger alignment with some of the strategies we're using to really start digging in, because I think a lot of high schools are seeing that we're kind of hitting a plateau in some of these metrics that we're monitoring, and we have to start collaborating and bringing our powers together as leaders in the building to think creatively about what are the best practices we can do to really begin to move the needle. And that involves thinking out of the box a little bit. They've brought in a new tool this year that will replace or has replaced GradPoint, which is a tool you guys have heard about in the past, which was a fine tool to use, but having seen how GradPoint benefits students and compared that to what I've seen this year with Edgenuity, I would say that we now are dealing with a little bit more robust program, one that's going to offer us a few more tools that we didn't have before, and I think the ability to do some things that we were not really able to do before. So I'm excited to talk about some of the things that we are doing. They touched on a few of those already in the slides, and I'll give just a little bit more detail on them. And then we've piloted a few things that I think may be something we want to explore a little bit more this year again at bringing back to the table and sharing with some of the other high schools. As they said earlier, freshman year is the most challenging year we see with our students. I have double the number of freshmen who fail or who are retained compared to the other grade levels. And it is that transition, that understanding the concept of I have to earn my credits to get to the next grade. Even though I spent all day today talking to about 400 students, incoming freshmen, talking about how the credit system works, how you've got to earn credits and have a GPA and be eligible to play sports, and exactly what courses have to be passed to make your way to 10th grade, despite saying that, it goes in, but it doesn't always stick, right? And so we find that some of our freshmen, it takes a while for them to fully comprehend that impact of those words. And so some of the things that we are doing at Cary High School, in addition to just educating them about what's required to be promoted, is using the tool Edgenuity to begin to leverage some of the content in it to try to target some of these gaps that we see. So if we look at our data in the summer and we see kids coming in that have some data gaps, or that their data indicates that they might have struggled with some of their courses, as they settle into their core classes, our teachers begin to try to tease out what are some of the areas these children are maybe deficient in. And they can go into the program Edgenuity and look up those specific objectives and target each of those students individually by assigning those strategic objectives to the children to work on to try to fill those holes. We're also really digging in with our EL students. We are one of the largest, our school has one of the largest EL populations in the district. About 35% of my students are Hispanic Latino. So when Drew was talking about that number of students who are retained, I mean, that's hitting home. That's who a lot of my students are that are struggling for various reasons, right? And we know language barrier is part of that. And so we're also trying to work with our teachers and our sheltered ESL core classes to use Edgenuity to pre-teach some of those skills to kids online and remotely before they sit in the heterogeneous classroom with students and hear it being taught by the teachers. So they're getting more familiar with the vocabulary, with the content, and that way we can let them be a better participant in the actual instruction and the discussion and be more successful along the journey, rather than having to come back at the end when the course is over and try to have them take it again and fill the hole. So that's one of the ways we're using objective recovery, is to target and pre-teach. We also, as we go through and take unit assessments, our kids are taking unit tests with their teachers, and this is for all students. When kids struggle or fail a test, the teachers can go into Edgenuity, and as a PLC, they've already, when they set up and make that test that they're going to give for that unit, the teachers also identify what are the specific objectives in Edgenuity for this course that we need to select that would be linked to this same unit test. So we've found the connection between the Edgenuity program and the test we're giving. We give the test to our students. The kids who fail that test are then given the chance to go into Edgenuity and work back through the instruction, because Edgenuity is not just a practice tool or a testing tool, it's also an instructional tool, because there's online instructors that are recorded and are delivering instruction and practice quizzes and assessments. And so kids work back through that content and then get a new score, and if that score is higher, it can replace that grade that they did poorly on. And that way we keep kids, in the group, right? In the group of passing students as they move toward the end of that course, with the ultimate goal of letting them earn the credit for the class when they're done. And sometimes that works beautifully, and sometimes it doesn't. And so when it doesn't, and a kid gets to the end of the quarter, then we offer that kid an academic recovery plan, which is very similar to what I described as objective recovery in the moment, but instead the teacher looks back over the whole quarter and finds out what were the units they struggled with. Okay, let me identify the key concepts I need to go back and have this child work back through, and then the kid can work back through those units and again have a chance to pull that first quarter grade up to a 59, which is right on the cusp of passing. So then again, we've set them up to not just give them something for nothing. They're still working through the content, now sometimes maybe even a third time, to try to make it sink in, and then they get to the end of that second half of the course, and if they pass that class and you average that with the 59, then they're probably going to pull out that passing grade and still earn that credit on their way to one more in the bank for promotion. In addition to that, we have kids who fail the course, and then we identify kids by monitoring credit counting. It talked about, well, that's a good picture of me, isn't there? Monitoring that credit counting we talked about. So we're monitoring their progress through the semester. I have strategic people assigned to track their alpha caseloads, and when they see that a kid has failed 2 or more classes, core classes, they look to see, okay, is this a child that we should possibly put into an alternative learning center lab that's based on a period-by-period assignment. And a kid would go in there and then work on Edgenuity courses with the support of a teacher to try to recover that credit. And then at this point, they're not getting a letter grade like the others I've described. They're getting a P to replace that failing grade. And then that's similar to the summer school model, that you guys are all familiar with, which we also offer. And this past summer, thanks to the support of central office, we served 180 students at Cary High School. About 30% of them were freshmen, and we earned 220 recovery credits to help kids get back on track for their cohort graduation. In addition to that, a few more pilot things that we talked about, or that I want to mention, is because we have such a large EL population at our school. I have a tremendous EL team. And so we have piloted a program this year, which I'm really excited about, that we took some kids who were newcomers. And by newcomers, I'll just say that's kids who have less than 3 years of education in their native language. They're new to our school. So we know they have higher, or they have less developed vocabulary in English. They're still working to develop that. And so we do see them struggle a little bit more than some of their counterparts who are already fluent in English. And so we cluster them together in their class that's sheltered instruction. And I have, in my case, I'm lucky to have some bilingual teachers who are ESL and also certified in English. And so they're able to teach them English 1 in a setting where they can speak both English and Spanish. In addition to that support, this year we took kids and those same kids, and we enrolled them in a virtual class and paired a science teacher with that course to work with, in collaboration with that sheltered ESL English teacher. And 80% of the students in this program, there were about 60-some kids total, 80% of the kids earned 2 credits, both a core English and a core science class. So we were really excited about that. They really responded well to it because they can, inside that program, there are some translating features that if they're having vocabulary issues, they can dump it in there and have it translate and read it to them, and then or sound it out for them. And so we saw they really enjoyed working through that. And so we are, this coming year, we're adding, in essence, a 5th period at our school. So I'm paying teachers to tutor after school for an hour Monday through Thursday. We're identifying kids who might be good candidates to take another course. Each day I've got different teachers of different subjects assigned to the tutoring center. So I've got teachers of record on hand to work with kids. And these kids are kind of going to be working through to see if they can earn not 4 credits, but 5 credits this school year. Because we do see a higher dropout rate in our EL students. And so our thinking is if we can get more credits into them earlier on, we stand a much better chance at keeping them on track and with their cohort to graduate. So I'm excited about that piece, and I'm excited about what we're going to get out of our 5th period. And finally, one other thing I need to plug in here too is because of the user-friendliness of Edgenuity, we've trained our ALC teacher. And so now when we are removing students from their classroom for a behavioral type intervention or behavior turn, we can now go into Edgenuity and through an email with the core teacher, we can identify what's the content the kid is missing today. And that ALC teacher can go into Edgenuity and say, okay, Johnny, your teacher just told me today you're working on quadratic equations, simplifying quadratic equations, and she can go in and assign that particular skill to him to work on, so he's not just sitting there doing busy work in an ALC lab. So that's some of the stuff we're doing, and I'm going to tell you my colleagues are doing some amazing things too out there. I'm just one voice here talking about it, and I'm just, again, thankful for the opportunity that they're creating to bring us together to share some of these practices that we have in place. So thanks for letting me share.
We'd like to thank you for the opportunity to share some of the practices that are happening as we think about transitioning from pre-K to K. And as we think about our early learning summit, that was our pilot. Our goal is to expand and make that larger. When we heard about the things for ninth grade transition, that we had Cary High School sitting at the table with us, but thinking about how are we getting consistent practices from school to school. And that's really our goal. So we wanted to highlight some of the things so you could hear specifically from our educators. But our real challenge is getting consistency of some of the practices, that we're not expecting them to look exactly alike, but have some of the same things like objective recovery, to be able to have opportunities for kids to recover credits. And so as we think about consistent tools, how are we implementing those tools with consistency from building to building, so we're affording the same experiences for our students no matter which school they attend. And so we want to thank both of our presenters for joining us, and we now open it up for questions.
There is a list of them, so Mr. Hershey is asked to start first. He has multiple, so.
I'll just start, I'll do a couple and then I'll pass it. Are we able to identify or is there a common academic profile from the K through 8 student to the one who is going to struggle and be retained in 9th grade?
So, historically speaking, one thing that I'll share, and this goes back to, and there's others in the room that may remember it, this board, I think, over the years has seen the correlation, unfortunately, between 3rd grade academic achievement and their graduation rate 9-10 years later. And so the answer, Mr. Hershey, is yes, there are definitely, I think, earmarks and profiles in terms of allowing us as a district to identify gaps in skills or performance that maybe predispose a student to be at a higher risk. I think we look at things, and for example, I know, Nolan can speak more in depth to this, but our schools look at, profiles of their incoming 8th grade students. They pour through it. I'm looking over at Ms. Barnes and counselors who pour through incoming 9th grade data, and they flag kids who maybe historically have never passed an EOG. And try to have an idea. By the way, classroom teachers do the same thing. And so, even knowing which kids, and we got to be careful, because what we don't want to do is, learn for the sake of labeling a kid when they walk in the door like, oh boy, this one's going to be trouble. And that is the deficit mindset. I think from a positive standpoint, looking at data like which kids are coming to us that have some significant deficiencies, who has attendance problems, who's had some disciplinary problems that we need not to, necessarily discipline them more sternly right away, but to be knowledgeable and aware and thinking about, even when we're doing what Mr. Bryant did today, 9th grade orientation days. How can we make sure we're extra vigilant in pulling kids in who absolutely need to be there, probably more than anybody else? And so I think it's a really important question. It happens both at the district level, but I think more importantly at the school level in terms of kind of those flags that we use to identify potential need even before they set foot in the building.
The other part of the 9th grade, and Dr. Wilson-Norman was kind enough, we had a meeting about using schedules, and so I'm excited about that coming out in the next few months. But I'm wondering if when we are identifying where they're behind and we're then giving them additional work, the Edgenuity, are we just stacking stuff on top of them while they're trying to learn something else? And is there a opportunity like the 5th period, or where they're not in class trying to, it feels like you start getting behind and it can overwhelm a student.
Great question.
And by the way, I'm pointing this out because I really appreciate, I'm highlighting Dr. Wilson-Norman's conversation that we had, where it's really thinking about it from the perspective of the student and what they're getting and the volume of work that they're getting, even to try to catch up.
Yes, I could answer maybe part of your question from the example I shared, right? So I would say we do a lot of monitoring and data diving before we ever consider putting a kid in any setting other than right there in their classroom. So those kids that I mentioned who we considered for the sheltered English one and the online physical science course, right? Those were kids that we had in the fall semester, and so my teachers knew them. Even though they were new to the school, they had a chance to get to know them and kind of know a little bit about their circumstances, what their motivation was, what their attendance looked like. And so we went through and talked student by student, is this a good candidate for this course or not? We do the same thing with the recovery lab. We do the same thing with even some of the summer school kids, like, because we know that some of them are going to be working all summer. So and that's one of the things we're seeing at my high school. We're seeing competing agendas a little bit. Students trying to help contribute to their family earnings, working late hours, showing up after first period's over. Right, and so part of what this fifth period might do is it might just give kid a chance not to come to first period because they work all night, but then come into second period and then still get their 4 credits because they'd be in fifth period. So I appreciate you asking that question because it's a good point. It can't just be a pile on more stuff to a kid who's struggling. It's got to be very strategic and very prescriptive. And I think that's what the intervention team and the caseload monitoring teams do, is really look at the data over the short term, but then also over the history of the child to make sure they're good candidates so that we don't dig our hole deeper. Yeah.
And I think as we continue to build out the model, it's about the professional development of those teams to make sure and looking at our structures and times. And so thinking about how do we all work together so it's not additional. And so we don't want to say that no child is getting additional, because we are continuing to deepen the work in which we're doing. And this is really the first full year of implementation coming up 24, 25.
I have more later.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what happened.
Thank you. And that overwhelming piece was one of my 2 questions, because I'm sitting there going, how am I supposed to learn this part of math? Well, when I can't, I'm still working on that other part. And so I appreciate that. I taught middle school predominantly, and so I think of, like, we would have middle school advisory. Is there any research, or are there any folks at the high school level doing like a freshman seminar course? If we know that this is a huge change from high school, even if you had Math 1 going into high school, math looks very different, especially with the 4x4 block. Is that something that there's been research on? Is that something that anybody has implemented, or is that just really not helpful at this time for our freshman students if they're having the hardest time?
Yeah, so historically speaking, and I don't know if we still have a seminar course code in the program planning guide. I know that at some point we had a freshman seminar course. I was actually a principal at a school where we used the John Hopkins Talent Development Model, which was based on that 9th grade transition. And I think there is some positive research that shows some positive affect with some of those kinds of programs. I think, those programs sometimes fall short because number one, it does take up another elective offering. And so sometimes we've got to be careful about, telling kids how exciting high school is going to be, and then between their curriculum assistance class, right, and their entry-level math class, and now your freshman seminar class, you're not going to touch art or you're not going to touch PE, right? And so there's a little bit of a slippery slope there. I think we do work to incorporate kind of some transitionary activities, like in the 9th grade English classroom, and some of those courses where typically it's all 9th graders that take them. And I think the other thing that we want to make sure that we're doing is building in opportunities for connections outside of the classroom. And I think, the last thing, even going back to Mr. Hershey's question, we cannot intervene in credit recovery our way out of this 9th grade challenge. And I think when we get to our second topic in a few minutes and start talking about the learning model, for this to be solved and for these gaps to close and for us to meet the goals that we've set out for 27, 28, quite frankly, core instruction has to be more effective in the classroom, right? We can't, all the great work that we're doing with recovery and Edgenuity and even objective recovery, by the way, that's just to be clear, that's a pretty significant shift historically speaking. The old model was, oh, you failed the class, you get to repeat it again next spring or next fall, or maybe you get to go to summer school. Now, I mean, what Mr. Bryan is describing is we're not letting kids fail for the week, or we're not letting the student fail for the quarter if we can help it, because they're recovering objectives and different aspects of learning to show mastery before it's too late in the quarter or the semester or over. So, Ms. Mappy, I think you make a good point. There are models that are out there. I think we've used some in the past, but ultimately, I think a lot of this is going to come down to core instruction that's consistently happening in classrooms.
So is that monitoring the major and minor grades in the course and, making sure that there's a number of assessments in order to make sure that we know that learning targets are being hit, and then we can
Absolutely. Yes,
All
ma'am.
right.
Absolutely.
I don't envy that job.
Everybody's going to get a chance, so you don't have to wave at me. I see you all. Every time you feel like your colleague's about to break, they're like, so we will now go in order. We will start with Ms. Rice and end with Ms. Evans.
Okay. First of all, this is my most favorite subject. So I started out my whole connectivity with Wake County through starting Track My Steps and coming directly to the amazing Ms. Kellogg and sitting down with her and say, hey, tell me what you want parents to really know, right? With the late Sherry, that was literacy director. Tell me what you really want parents to know. So I'm very familiar with the things that you shared, excited about how things have progressed over the years. So I just want to say kudos to the hard work that you all have been doing. One of the things that I want to continue to share or say is that the question was asked, the trajectory, or how do we know what's the profile? The profile is early childhood education. The profile is 0 to 5. If the kid is not reading when they come into school or almost there, we already know there's a problem in 3rd grade. Period. We don't have to guess about it. It's hands down. So it's the work that I've done for 2 decades with early childhood development with Dawn, which is why I absolutely love her, right? And the things that we need to know. And so the thing that I would encourage us as a board to do, if we want to change what academics look like within these subgroups, we have to utilize our partnerships as we continue to do our community engagement around reaching out to our prenatal clinics, around reaching out to the child care systems, or just community period, whose young 0 to 5s are not in pre-K, that are not in a child care center because mom and dad can't afford it, but Big Mama is taking care of it. However, Big Mama doesn't understand that I need to teach letters and alphabets while the child is growing. And so I encourage us to look at ways of how to connect community, particularly with moms who are in the prenatal clinics, or who are in those children well child checks from 0 to 5 in those facilities. And we have to be the aggressors of this if we want to see our data change at the district level. I've definitely been working with our Project Enlightenment folks for my region to better help my community and districts understand that, which are the populations that are most greatly affected within those subgroups. So I just want to really highlight that for families or anyone who might be listening. If your child is 2 and 3 years old and can't identify alphabet, you are in a crisis. People don't want to believe it. They say, that's too early, they're too young. No, they're not. They can know their alphabet through identification at 2 and 3 years old. It is not rocket science work. Children have to learn how to talk. They're talking at 2 and 3 years old, making very good sentences and singing a lot of great songs. If you're going to teach them how to talk, you might as well teach them what they're supposed to be saying and what they're supposed to know. I know that this works. The educators are right. Look at them. They're shaking their heads. They know that it's true. And it's just intentional play at home. But I'm going to continue to sound the alarm and say it every opportunity that I get, because it's the populations that are connected to me that don't understand this and wait for teachers to teach it to their kids when they enter kindergarten, and then they're fussing and ranting and raving at teachers at 3rd grade because their child is failing, and then they'll call me, and the first thing I'll listen to is the rant and the rave, and then I'll say very calmly, what did you do from 0 to 5? And then I politely tell them that is not the teacher's problem, that is a you problem. Teachers didn't do that. Teachers are trying to play catch up from 0 to 5, then from K to 3, and it's not fair. But it's only fair when parents are aware, right? And I'm just saying we want to sound the alarm of the awareness. We know how to do preventive measures. We have to do it together well as a community. So that's my rant about pre-K and how we change these numbers. It's not all this remediation and recovery. It's the intensity of it, yes, because we didn't do early childhood education and because we need universal pre-K, period, in order to change our cultures. The last thing I want to ask, this is a question here. Credit recovery is great, and I support that. But I'm also concerned on a different level, I don't know if everybody is aware, is that because we use so many of our dollars around the credit recovery piece, because we don't have early childhood education stuff, our children who are doing proficient or above proficiency, right? They don't necessarily always have the opportunity for their credit advancement, if that makes sense. And so what I would like to see or ask, what are we doing for our students who are doing well, but don't get the opportunity to register for a class because either the school base, and remember I always talk about base and what we do here is two different things. The school base will say, well, you can't take this class unless you're going to do remediation. So what are we doing to support our students who are actually doing well, but they want to take another course and may not always get to take it with what's our with our NC public school. And so how are we helping those students, and what other opportunities are we providing so that as many students that we're doing all this recovery with, that these same students are really getting the opportunity to do credit advancement to do what they need to do. And so I think we need to look at that lens of equity, right? And I know we care about students who are struggling, but parents are frustrated when they've got children who are coming in that they've done their early childhood education work with, right? They've done their work of getting an extra tutor or whatever, and there's these opportunities to take these classes, and they can't because they will say, principals will say, we don't have that for you because we have to use that for students in recovery. So I don't know if we have any conversation around that or what it might look like, or coming back and sharing another time. How are we creating more opportunities for our students and parents who are doing well, who matter just as much as our students who are struggling, and how do we support those families as well?
I think one of the things, and this will probably be a bring back, but we have created an advanced learning department. And so we had intervention and AIG was an add-on, but now we only have advanced learning. And when we look at the advanced learning department, it is really to begin to look at, so how are we thinking about both sides of the spectrum? What are the offerings that we have? And so thinking about, we have lots of things around single subject acceleration and many of those things, but thinking about how do we provide advanced learning, thinking about some of the barriers for having students take more courses with CCP, thinking about not just, so expanding that opportunity. So we'd like to, I think we have it slated to bring back, we'd like to bring the advanced learning presentation back so we can talk about the full scope of the work that we're doing, to really think about how do we do advanced learning in our district.
Very good. That's all I got.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. Whenever I hear the term credit recovery, it does give me a little twinge because I feel like it should be more than credit recovery. It should be proficiency recovery. And the question I have is, when somebody is identified as needing some remediation or needing the you said that Edgenuity does have an instructional tool piece to it. Is there data to show whether the mastery of that information is there using those tools? How does it compare to the co-instruction? I just want to make sure that, when they're going to get that extra help, are they actually learning that objective, that information?
When you go into that system and we utilize that program, there's a pre and a post assessment that it goes along with each objective and each unit.
Okay.
And so they can actually show what they're proficient on before they even take that objective and or unit.
Okay.
And then there's a measure at the end to determine, after they've done the skills, to show that they have passed that part of the objective or unit, to see where they land at the end of it. So there are measures in there before. There are also, like Ms. Bryant was just saying before, we have built-in tutors, videos, and you can assign those in the system as well to ensure, hey, you have to watch this tutor video, then you have to do this activity. And there's other best practices, like Dr. Wilson-Norman was saying, it's about best practices and consistency with some of the things, and we've created a manual for Edgenuity to help display what those should be, and utilizing things like Mr. Bryant is doing as some of our exemplars that schools should be doing. So those are our goal.
Yeah, I'm happy to see that we're getting more closer to having real-time identification of people, the students having learning objective problems with a particular objective. So I think it's great that we can get closer to that.
And if I could just add, I know that I'm a low man on the totem pole.
No, you're not.
You
No,
absolutely
no,
You are
no,
here to give your
no.
feedback.
And I would say, so just to clarify one thing, so credit recovery, they do have to be proficient to get the credit recovered, right? So they do have to show mastery through all of those unit assessments that they go through. And I'm fortunate enough, and I think many of my colleagues try to do the same thing, and we actually schedule a certified math teacher to be in that lab when these kids are recovering that math class. So they're not just working on Edgenuity, they're also supplementing that instruction. So if the teacher sees, oh, they didn't do that well in that quiz, they're pulling them over and reteaching person to person that skill too, and then having them go back in. Because you're right, the last thing we want to try to do is put a kid on a computer, say learn it, check a box, and then try to roll them into the next math class, especially because they're not going to be able to pass that course.
Right.
And that is something that's one of the things that I like about Edgenuity. I'm not saying it's perfect, right? But it is better than the tool we had because the instruction is better that's in it and more engaging for the kids, and there are better controls on it to make sure that kids are progressing through it and not just, skipping over stuff.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I'm not sliding the term.
No, I get you. I didn't want to misspeak and people on the listening or whatever misunderstand that either, because you're right. It is not a freebie. And then also the recovery, the objective recovery, is being controlled by the teacher in the classroom, who at the end is assigning the grade, right? So we know that is also making sure that kid knows it before they go on. So great question.
That's it.
Let's call for
This is a big subject for me. It's one of the most reasons why I decided that I wanted to be on the board for this purpose. So it's very important to me. And I have a couple of quick questions for you that might steer my question. When did Edgenuity start?
This past school year. So we started initial implementation in 23-24, so we're starting kind of the first full year two,
August?
into 24-25.
So last August, September it started?
I think it was available, but I wouldn't say it.
Last summer, yeah.
Okay, and is this in all schools?
It is. All high schools.
So I think it's a wonderful presentation. It's important to know all of this information and what you said. I think what Ms. Rice brought up about, preschool, how important it is at that level to get them a kickstart into what they're doing. But it's also extremely important, as you showed in your stats with ninth grade. That means that these kids have gone through many years to get to that point, and they're taking a major hit in ninth grade. And what you said before, the core instruction needs to be more effective. I think that's going to be one of the key points that we really need to pay attention to. Because when we get to 9th grade, I could tell you, and we've talked about consistency in Wake County being one of our biggest issues. What you said sounded wonderful, and I'm glad that you're having success with that. And I'm going to tell you that it's not like that in every school. And that's where the consistency is harming so many of our students. And that's when I start to get a little upset when we hear it's like a cheerleading thing going on over here, that it's really wonderful. And it's not for many students. And it's for all, not every single one of our students that is facing this challenge. It is not going that smooth. So when we have something like summer school or credit recovery, I'm not sure if everybody's aware that you don't get that one-on-one instruction that you talked about. You don't have any kind of teaching of those lessons that you didn't get. So if you fell behind in a math class and you don't really understand what's happening, every time they either forgive an assignment or move you forward or give you something that is a little bit less to just say, here, do this, and then we'll move you on. That child is now missing not one part of that lesson, but a whole part of that building block to get them to the next level. That is imperative for us to understand why we are losing so many kids and our proficiency scores are so low. I know we jumped up a little bit, but we did not jump up enough. To be 4 years after COVID and having all interventions that we're speaking about, if we are really reaching as many students as we want to reach, we would be doing exactly what he was speaking about in every single one of our high schools. I also have a question about when is it that we are targeting these proficiency, or when people are starting to struggle? At what point do we reach out to the kids and say, okay, we need to do something here, before it does build to sound like it's something that's so overwhelming? Because I can tell you right now, you'll get to the point where they start forgiving assignments and they just start crossing them off the list, which means, yes, they have moved on to the next level. Because we have said, okay, you have 18 assignments. If you just do these 6, we will move you on to the next level. That child is forever missing all of that material because they're not getting it. They did not have the important building blocks to get them to the next level. This is something that I hear over and over again. So I want to know, at what point do we actually step in to say, you know what, this child wasn't getting the last 3 assignments, let's do something where we actually get in. I mean, I heard all of these different things about supplementing, the teacher steps in, the process, like all these different things. At what point do we wait for that child to get to that point where we realize they're just not getting it?
It really should be before the child fails. So when a child takes an assessment and they don't do well on it, it is going back and thinking about the objective recovery. But I also think, Mrs. Caulfield, we are also dealing with culture. That some schools, and so when we do our next presentation, we're starting to talk about expectation, that we're also dealing with culture around one principal sees, the reassessment and set structures. Another principal leaves it teacher to teacher. And so as we think about even some of these conversations we're having, we're also thinking about scope and scale. So we heard about Cary High School. This is the focus of the district. We have a consistent manual now. We did not have that a year ago. We have people out there making sure that there's training taking place for everyone who is utilizing it. We have teams of people, Emily Montfort and Dr. Brian Johnson, who can go out and work with principals to set this up. We didn't have that before. And so it's really about making the big small, that we think about 200 schools, but how are we really using our staffs to support schools? And so we didn't just buy a new tool and put it on teachers, that how are we training? And we weren't there last year. And so I really say, even though the tool was purchased, this is really the initial implementation with the structures in place to really better support teachers and students. I think we had to replace the tool, but I think it goes back to how do we support principals and their teams around implementation. And I think we would all acknowledge that there was even, what is objective recovery? This new credit recovery tool, and we're in a better place to really start getting consistent implementation, is what my response would be. That trying to put systems in place and working with our principals and their teams to be able to implement those systems so that every school is like what you heard about Cary High School today.
And may I, also, a tool does not replace good teaching and learning. Right, and we know that. And so that's what we talked about. Well, we met with principals, APIs, deans, and all of that last week, the week prior, to go over this Edgenuity manual. And we talked about you need to go into your PLCs. Your PLCs need to be putting this as part of their discussion. How does this alter their teaching and learning, their lesson plan, their strategic planning, all of those things. So it's not just the tool it's also going to be problem of practice, right? And so those are the types of things that Dr. Wilson-Norman is speaking on as far as with the manual, to try to start building some of that consistency in our consistent meetings with principals between Region 1 and Region 2 with Emily Mountford as well. And so I think Mr. Bryant kind of alludes to that earlier, how he's seen a little bit more openness to that discussion and finding out how we can support all instead of one.
Thank you, and I'll leave the rest of what I have, but I do want to ask, are we reaching out to teachers who are on the front line and asking their advice on how we get this done? Because I think they're sitting in the classroom, and that is one thing I hear from teachers over and over again, is that we make them go and get their master's degree, right? They have a degree, we ask them to get their master's, they know what they're doing. So are we involving them in the conversation to figure out how we can perfect this? I mean, because we really do have a lot of kids, especially from COVID, that need to recover and then move on to the new material. So are we including them in this conversation?
They're included in the conversation as we continue to build out our work, even looking at how do we have a consistent group of teachers, elementary, middle, and high, that we can get feedback from, that around consistent subjects. And so that is something that we're working on, both principals and teachers.
And as a principal, I can't speak for all principals, but most of the principals I know, our teachers are our most valuable tool to serving the kids. So, I consider them the content experts, and I'm just their coach. And yes, so we do lean into that. We lean into the professional learning communities deciding, how to use these tools and giving us feedback on how to use them. And I'm excited about Edgenuity because it's another tool. But we also have, in my school and other schools, we have Smart Lunch, where kids are coming in for tutoring with their teacher. The biggest struggle, and I know the district's working on this too, getting the kids to show up, right? Absenteeism is probably the biggest challenge we face in schools to having all these things work. If 20% of my kids are not showing, are considered excessively absent, chronically absent, that's holes that are all over the place. And backfilling those holes to try to keep them on track, we gotta use everything we can to try to do that. And so, it is tough. And so we feel all that you're saying, and I applaud you for speaking up on behalf of teachers because they deserve it. And yes, their voice is brought to the table a lot at my school and many of my colleagues' schools. So.
Okay. And then the last little bit of question I had, and this kind of ties into what you just said, the mentoring and peer support, what does that look like? Because we do really lose engagement from some of these kids that start to fail and start to have that distance where it starts to stretch out. And, I kind of feel like on that Titanic when she's holding on to the ice and she's reaching out, like, I feel like I could see the kids, like, separating because it just becomes too overwhelming and a large load. They don't feel like they could actually recover. Ironically, it's called credit recovery, right? So what are we doing as a process for mentoring and peer support?
Yeah, so first of all, the reason it made that list, as I pointed out, was not because it's systemically implemented historically, but because it is a best practice that we have identified as an area of priority in this Caulfield. To your point, that looks like, for example, at a school, it could be a group of seniors that are matched up and paired with a rising freshman. Sometimes those connections happen even in the summer before school starts, right? So there's different models for what that can look like effectively, but and Mr. Bryant knows this better than anybody. There are a lot. First of all, going back to Ms. Rice's question, that peer mentoring relationship is not just for the betterment and the benefit of the student that maybe is the ninth grader just walking in the door. It also is an incredible opportunity for the upperclassmen to show some leadership and connection with a younger student and really set a positive example for them the day they walk in the door. So that's on that list in part because we know and recognize that has a really positive effect. The research does back that up. And so part of what we're doing, just as we're writing manuals to create parameters for the use of Edgenuity and that credit recovery tool, we're also going to be creating some parameters and provide some support and assistance for schools on the peer mentoring because it can be so valuable.
That's awesome. I know that we send high school kids sometimes to 8th grade to get them ready and geared up to come to 9th grade.
Yes.
I think it might be good if we actually have them do a follow-up too,
Yes.
for that exact reason.
Absolutely.
Thank you. We're getting short on time,
I know.
Ms. Edmonds.
So when is Mr. Bryant going on the road to talk to his peers, his fellow high school principals? I know y'all do professional development with your, high school principals, but if this started late sometime last year, the professional development is in place for this specifically, that transition, because you talked about the early learning summit. Is there a
We have
high school second? Anyway, go ahead.
I think we have kind of restructured where Mr. Bryant, as we were listening and thinking about some of the work that we're doing with our principals around subgroups of students. And so there'll be opportunities not only to share with high school, but also to share with everyone who is trying to address the subgroup of students, and so sharing best practices. So that is what our school leadership meetings will look like. And so schools will be able to choose what strand or subgroup that they're focused on, and that's the professional development in which they will receive tailored to what they want to work on with their schools.
So not an
Bryant.
educator, but I would hope that you would focus on this 9th grade transition somehow in some way with your PD.
Absolutely, and I joke with Mr. Bryant walking in the door, the reward for high-quality work is that you get to share with the board, but I think maybe, in all seriousness, to your point, it's probably more important that Mr. Bryant and others like him that you'll hear from in a
There's
few
nothing
minutes
like
are
peer
sharing with their peers
Nothing like peer
firsthand, right? If we're sharing with the board, we absolutely ought to be doing exactly the same thing and elevating those best practices with their colleagues as well. So thank you for highlighting that.
There are amazing principals out there.
Just a second. So we are not going to take any more comments here because we have a whole nother presentation. So write them down, and if they finish early, we'll circle back. Because today I'm going to be the late person, so I'm like, okay, we're going to, and again, as I said to Ms. Caulfield, my comment isn't to one person. This is our core business. I expect for you to ask the questions, but I also need them to get through this, because guess what we do? There's always things we're going to need them to bring back, and so please write them down, and we'll reserve at the end for you to come back to this presentation. But this is our core business, so don't apologize for taking up the space to our board members. Because if we're not doing this right, then why are we really here? So thank you very much, and I will let you move on to your next presentation, and also note, Dr. Wilson-Norman, you said it best as they prepare to switch out for the next group, is all of this that we're talking about is a culture shift, and we are glad you were here to bring us into the culture shift, because that's really where we are. So thank you very much.
I'd like to see a demonstration of that introducing pre and post test. See if I can learn something.
I'll know where it's coming from.
So as we transition to our next presentation, we really want to focus on academic excellence and want to share with you how we're doing some work now leading through the lens of our students. That as we think about our desired outcomes for this presentation, that we want to clearly communicate the principles and benefits of our new Learning Center learning model. How are we focusing on our students? The model is designed to enhance student engagement and outcomes by focusing on their individual needs and experiences. Second, we will demonstrate how the 2024-2025 academic priorities align with our district goals, particularly in the area of instructional equity, quality, and student proficiency. This alignment is critical for driving consistent and impactful progress across all schools. Finally, we will showcase the implementation strategies we're using to discuss the impact on student achievement, engagement, and overall well-being. that this presentation aligns with our strategic goals, that as we continue to focus on student knowledge and skills, as well as behavioral health. That we also, again, must begin to measure everything we do based on the metrics in which we want to achieve. And so we have aligned this to our graduation rates, proficiency and growth, and overall student well-being. It is very important for us to tie the connection of academics and student well-being tightly together so that we think about the total child and their experiences. When we think about the power of a learning model, what is a learning model? It is to imagine our district as a vast landscape with many pathways leading to the ultimate goal of student success. Just as we explore the use of a compass to navigate through uncharted territories, our district uses a learning model to stay on course and to achieve our teaching and learning objectives. Our learning model is the compass that aligns what our strategic plan outlines and guides us to ensure every student's success. A common learning model allows us to increase coherence across the district, creating a focused, sustained, and shared vision for high-quality teaching and learning. It ensures that all students, regardless of which school they attend, receive the same high-quality education. And so as we think about why the learning model, that we want to ensure that we have personalization that is student-focused, that there's a level of rigor that meets the needs of all students, that we want to empower our educators to promote the excellence that they bring each day. But we also want to focus on equity and excellence to ensure that we have consistent experiences. What do we experience as a student of Wake County Public School System? And then we want to have principles to help guide our success, the roadmap that we're all connected to. So it doesn't matter if you're a year-round school, a magnet school, an elementary school, a high school, that there's connected tissue that keeps us together so that we can ensure that we have the same common language and our students are experiencing some of the same experiences when it comes to high-quality teaching and learning. And so when we think about our learning model, what is it? That it is very important to us that our students are seen, challenged, engaged, and known. And so when we think about how are we going to ensure that every student is seen in each classroom, how are we challenging our students? How are we engaging them and getting to know them? See Me emphasizes the importance of a positive classroom environment, that we hear a lot about relationships and classroom climate, that we want to outline what does See Me look like in every classroom in our district. It's about ensuring every student feels safe, acknowledged, and valued. Challenge Me focuses on elevating academic excellence from every student. Those who are already proficient, those who need academic support, but we want every child who enters our school district to be challenged no matter where they enter. Engaged, that we want to make learning interactive and relevant, that students are engaged in the learning process, and what strategies are we using in every classroom to ensure that it is an engaging learning environment. Know Me underscores the significance of personalized learning. Through formative assessments, we tailor our teaching to meet the unique needs of each student. The model isn't an idea. We want to make it actionable. It's our roadmap for ensuring every student is seen, known, challenged, and engaged. It's how we guide them to success. And so as we think about digging deeper into each of these components, Michelle Woodson will talk about the work related to See Me and Know Me because it tailors and aligns closely to student support services.
So I'm going to begin with the concept of See Me, which is really trying to make sure that we're promoting that positive classroom climate through clear routines and procedures, and that's essential to making sure that students feel safe in that classroom. It's about creating an environment of safety and respect where they're ready to learn. This positive climate is closely linked to advancing student wellness practices in our classrooms, which ensures that our students' social and emotional needs are met, and making them more engaged and more capable learners. So some specific examples of what that might look like are how do we make sure that we're teaching teachers how to create that classroom environment, right? How do they literally set up their classroom? Where do the desks go? Interestingly, we had a conversation with a teacher and a principal yesterday. Do you know how to stand up and go throw something in the trash can, and where is that located? So it can be physical environment. It is the expectations that you share with your students. It's the agreements that you come to. Those created a classroom culture and environment that create a safe and orderly place for learning to take place. We also want to think about what are the systems and structures that we're putting in place, both in a classroom but also school-wide, and how are we looking at our data and responding to that data based on the needs of where they are. Like, where are our students right now, and what does that mean about the decisions we make for tomorrow? And something as simple as an opportunity to say, if I have a student who might be struggling and I've monitored that along the way, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more with Nomi, how do I make sure that there's a relationship with that student, and I'm checking in with them this morning to say, hey, how are you doing? Are you ready for this day today? Are there challenges you might have had last night or at home that we need to address before we even start this day? And what do we need to do as we're preparing and moving forward? So that kind of moves us into the concept of Nomi, which really emphasizes the importance of maximizing the power of formative assessment. And I want to talk about formative assessment. This really is a lot of what we've talked about in this last presentation, but it is the art and science of teaching. It is the ability to effectively assess on an ongoing basis, where are your students, and do I know you individually and my class as a collective whole? We want to make sure we're checking for monitoring their progress. Are they understanding? What are the individual needs, both academically and social and emotionally, that those students need to have? And do I have processes as a teacher that's going to make sure that I continually check along the way? So we don't want to wait until they're in 9th grade. We want to start in pre-K and in kindergarten to assess where are you, what's working, what's not working, and we want to go ahead and intervene as soon as we see it and make sure that we're trying to address that, because never will that gap be smaller than it is in kindergarten and pre-K. So we absolutely want to address it there. But that is an important and critical component to this learning model, to make sure that our students are seen. We also want to make sure that these strategies are more than just initiatives, that they're a commitment to ensuring that every student is truly seen and known, and that they're supported in every aspect of their educational journey. So now we're going to continue exploring the learning model with Mr. Cook, our Assistant Superintendent for Academics, and he's going to share more insights on implementing the Challenge Me and Engage Me.
Thanks, Michelle. So, I'll leave it to some of our school leaders over here to share some more specifics and examples on some of these areas that I'll share an overview with, that they can be much more articulate and specific than I, in terms of what this can look like in our school. And I do want to call out, as we just finished our last conversation, the goal here is that this becomes, we move this from best practice to expected practice. And our teachers and our principals cannot possibly work any harder than they already are. And so we feel like it's incumbent upon us at the district level to provide them with the resources, the supports, the guidance to make clear what these expectations are, but more importantly, also provide them with the tools that they need to be able to implement this in a really successful and consistent way across the district. So when we're talking about Challenge Me, this component really is all about setting high expectations and providing the support needed to meet them. We do this by creating learning targets aligned to the standards. If you've been to some classrooms at any point in time, you've probably seen learning targets or goals and objectives or essential questions or something along those lines posted somewhere visibly in the classroom. And so part of what we want to do is create some consistent standards and expectations for what that looks like and what effect that can have in a positive way on teaching and learning in a classroom. These targets ensure that every lesson is purpose-driven and that students are clear on the goals they're working towards. It sounds basic and fundamental, but it's critically important for students to know, what is it that is our goal for today's lesson? How are we going to get there? Give me a preview of what we're going to be doing for the next X number of minutes or days or weeks to show mastery in some of these goals and objectives. Additionally, designing grade level assignments is crucial. Most of our courses across the pre-K-12 continuum come along with state standards. Those state standards are very clear about the expectations for learning that we have for our students. And it's our responsibility, obviously, to ensure that our students are meeting and showing mastery in each of those standards. So these assignments that reflect those standards are not just about compliance, they're supposed to be about rigor, challenging students to think critically and apply their knowledge really in meaningful ways. As we look at Engage Me, we emphasize promoting higher order thinking skills. Integrating writing across all content areas is one method that we can achieve that goal. Writing, as we all know and understand, is not just a skill. It's a really powerful tool for reflection, analysis, and communication by embedding writing in every single subject, yes, even math. We know that can have a really, really powerful effect in the learning that students have, fostering critical thinking, creativity. We also want to focus on enhancing comprehension and engagement by using high-impact instructional strategies. There's a whole myriad of these that research shows time and again have the most positive impact in a positive way on student learning. And we want those to be systemically implemented across the district, again, recognizing and understanding it's incumbent upon us at the district level to ensure the resources are there, the access is there, that teachers aren't having to reinvent the wheel, that they're not having to spend 2 hours every night for every 10 minutes of instruction the next day, coming up with strategies that we know have a high impact value for students when it comes to their learning. So those are just a few examples of each of those two areas. We believe that by challenging and engaging our students, we are setting them on a path to lifelong learning and success. Each of these strategies we know and understand plays a vital role in ensuring that our students are not just passive recipients of information, but instead are active participants in their own learning journey. And so to talk a little bit about how we propose to get there and some of the work and support the district and schools will provide, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Edgenuity.
As we think about the work, so we shared the model with you, but as we think about how do we provide the tools and realign our work to best support the model, that we think about it starts with professional learning. So we have worked really hard to redesign our professional learning where it aligns with the learning model. And so when you look at our professional development catalog, we begin to look at what does a beginning teacher receive that aligns with the learning model. What does a teacher from 0 to 4 years, what sorts of support do they receive? What does an instructional facilitator receive? What does an API receive? So really trying to tailor the professional development based on role and years of experience. And so we've aligned all of this work to our PL days in conjunction with our professional learning team, that we try to really clarify and support what things are required, what things are choice-based, what things are needs-based. So as a principal is working closely with the teacher, what sorts of things can we tailor to support what they particularly need to work on? That we have really tried to align our assessments and data utilization. So how do we begin to look at where are we in terms of formative assessments, which students are on track, which schools are on track, and how do we go in and support our schools around our learning model? And so these are just a few pieces as we continue to deepen our implementation around our learning model that we put in place to really help and support our principals. We have a dashboard that has lots of tools that will support our teachers as well as our principals. And as we go out in the course of the year, that we are really aligning everything we do to the work. So our curriculum documents, just a number of things to really focus our district on our learning model and try to reduce the amount of competing things that we are putting out and really being focused across all departments around the implementation of this learning model. And so when we think about our focus for academic advancement, and academic advancement is student support services, academics, and EC. Really looking at what is the student experience, how are we tracking and monitoring student achievement, and how are we supporting educators, teachers, teacher assistants, principals, everyone in the building around moving towards this focus around our learning model. That is our work. The experiences of our students, how are we achieving and moving the academic needle, and how are we providing tailored support for our educators in our buildings. And so when we think about CME, we wanted you to hear from a building principal about how are they implementing CME, where they are on the journey. And so we have a principal that will share a little bit about each of the components of the learning model. And so we will have Angela Cooper from Roseville Middle School come join us, and to save time, you all come around the table.
Good afternoon. Oh, come on. I'm a multi-track year-round principal, but I still have energy. So you got to do a little bit better than that, right? Good afternoon. Yes. Excited to be here with you this afternoon to talk about the component of CME. And I'm Angela Cooper, like I said, proud principal of Roseville Middle School. And I will say that although I'm talking about CME, I'm so invested in all components, and so is Roseville Middle School, and love the fact that we have these 4 components to build some type of shared understanding around how we're approaching the whole student in our schools. And so, I'll just start off by saying, I truly believe that CME is the foundation of the work that leads to all the other work that we're doing at our schools. At Roseville Middle School, we're really invested in hearing and seeing and acknowledging and celebrating the students in our building. And it's not what we do, it's who we are. It's like how we operate. It's a part of our culture. So if you were to come in my building, you wouldn't see just one thing. You would see this is just how we operate and how we do business at Roseville Middle. Because we are big believers in if you can see me, then you can reach me, and then you can teach me, right? And so that's sort of like the mindset that we go into it with. Kids don't learn from people they don't like and they don't think like them, right? And so it's important that we build meaningful connections with students. And so that's sort of the mindset that we operate. And so I'll go back to, this is my 3rd year at Roseville Middle, but starting there, 2022? Yeah, 2022, when I got there, I spent some time just sort of assessing my school. And what I realized is that the students who had the most meaningful connections, the most pride in our school, who felt the most connected, were my athletes, my band students, maybe those who were in chorus. My other students, not so much. And that showed up in their academics, that showed up in their attendance, that showed up in their behavior. And so I immediately knew that I needed to do something to sort of shift and change culture at Roseville Middle. And so I took to my leadership team the task of, we got to build a sense of belonging at Roseville Middle. These kids don't feel like they belong here. This is just where they attend because they have to attend school. But I don't think they feel like this is my school, right? I belong here. And so we began to look at our master schedule. We began to look at what other schools were doing. We just sort of went on this brainstorming and journey. And what we decided to do first was implement clubs at Roseville Middle. And not clubs where parents had to pick them up at the end of the day, or if they could stay or get a ride to school, they could, or get a ride from school, they could be there, but clubs during the school day. And so every Wednesday at Roseville Middle School at 9:15, come join us. We go into playtime with kids, right? We offer over 35 clubs to students, and they're all based on student interests. Everything from Dungeons and Dragons to mock trial to baking to knitting to volleyball. It's a host, FBLA, FCCLA, all of the clubs, right? And it's just an opportunity for kids to build connections and environments with other students who have similar interests with them, but also with adults who have that similar interest. And it may not be an adult they would ever connect with at my school because they're not on their grade level or not on their track, and other kids they might not would see either, but there's just a connection that happens. And what I'll tell you is during that time, it is the most endearing moments of the day because you see kids interacting with other students. You see kids, there's no test involved, there's no academic expectations. It's just a time for kids to be kids again, right? And to get to know other kids. And socialization is very important to me because I feel like we've lost that a little bit after the pandemic. So kids talking and playing and laughing with adults and with each other is just so very important to me. And our teachers have enjoyed it. Initially, it was like, oh, it's one more thing. But I think over time they realized how meaningful it was to build those connections with kids. And it has been, I think, an invaluable endeavor for us at Roseville Middle. So we're continuing it. We haven't started yet. We start August 28th at Roseville Middle with clubs. If you want to come by, join us. But what I'll say is it has really helped, I think, to give kids some sense of connectedness with other students who may like the same things I like or think the way I think or invested in some of the things that I'm invested in. But as we've started this school year, just to give you some insight into why I say this is how we do business, we haven't started clubs yet, but we still run our club schedule on Wednesdays. And from that 9:15 to 9:45 time, we do community building lessons. And everybody who's invested in clubs, when I say everyone's invested, I only leave one person in the front office, right? Hopefully we don't have any emergencies, but there's only one person answering the phones, but everybody's in the club. Bookkeeper, receptionist, counselors, APs, everybody does a club. And so on Wednesdays now, until we start clubs, we do community building lessons. And so those same people push into classrooms with core teachers, and we're doing community building every Wednesday during that time with students. Lessons, activities, things to build relationships with students, and we do that until we start clubs August 28th. But we're also, we started on this journey with our teachers as well, and building or their capacity around restorative practices at Roseville Middle. So we're on that journey in terms of creating inclusive classroom environments, like where Michelle said, where kids feel safe. And so our teachers have been doing a lot of professional development around that, and making sure that we're using these welcoming practices when kids come into all classrooms at Roseville Middle School. Your old school. Yes, I guess you remember, right? When all kids come into classrooms at Roseville Middle School, that they are feeling seen and they're feeling valued and acknowledged. And we do lots of cultural recognition throughout and identity recognition throughout our school. Every month, whatever we're celebrating it big. And so all students are feeling like they are celebrated at Roseville Middle. And so we just really work hard to make sure that that is how we operate, not an activity we're doing to check off something. And I think it has been impactful at my school, because what I'll share with you is that going into this, we had really high suspension rates. We had huge disproportionality between our subgroups and suspensions. And from 22 to 23, 23, 24, we reduced suspensions by 50%. We've also been able to close that disproportionality between our African American kids and our Hispanic kids and our white kids in terms of suspensions. And we've been able to grow our overall proficiency in our school. So that's when I say, if you see me, you can reach me and you can teach me, right? Because it all sort of aligns and works together, and that's why I love this model. So I'll be quiet now. Thank you.
All right, how about next? Yes, I'll go after that. Scott Gayton, principal at Lincoln Heights Environmental Connections Magna Elementary School down in Fuquay, and I have the Challenge Me. And I just want to kind of lay the groundwork of where we have been and where we are now, and how the Challenge Me has been impactful for us. I am in my 4th year at Lincoln Heights. I was actually the AP there prior to starting as principal. And when I started there as principal in 2021, after COVID, we shifted our focus to really proficiency and beyond for all kids. So all kids had to move to that proficiency, regardless of where they were, and we've made good progress. And so what that did is set high expectations from the teachers to the kids. And through those high expectations, we've been able to really challenge our students. Fast forward about a year and a half from that time, was able to look into some research that was done through TNTP that looked at the article, I don't have it with you, about unlocking acceleration and how below grade level work is holding students back in literacy. And this research came right after the pandemic and identified that students, after the pandemic, were giving an increasingly amount of below grade level work in the belief that we're catching them up. The belief was we'll catch them up. However, the research identified that we were actually doing more harm than good. And when we actually gave students grade level work that was aligned to standards and aligned to the work of the grade, students outperformed or performed equally as well as they would have with that below grade level work. So what that did and it instilled in our staff is that it is essential that we give kids access to the grade level work that they are entitled to. And so, and adding that to, and what has really driven me to, love this learning model. We were doing a lot of these things prior to this even coming out, is when we think about high poverty schools, the research also shows that this was even more disproportionately happening in these high poverty schools, and those students were falling farther and farther behind. Historically, Lincoln Heights at one point was considered a significantly low-performing school and was one of the schools that was a high-performing school probably in 2017, 18, and 19. That was kind of their demographics. And so when we provide students, so what we did is we started providing, looking through our PLCs, looking through the standards, taking a deep dive into the standards that the state and the district have set out for us, and identifying the work that is on grade level for kids. And even though we say all kids, that is what we believe, is all kids needed to get that grade level work with support. So scaffolds were put in place to support students so that they could then achieve at that level. And ironically, this was a huge relief for our teachers. In the elementary, our teachers teach every subject. They have a huge load on their plates. The load is ginormous. But when we were teaching below grade level work, that load became exponentially larger. It was my belief that teachers should not have to teach, fifth grade teachers should not have to teach fourth grade, third grade, and second grade. And so when we said give kids, because the research shows they can do the work. When you give them the work, they can do it. And that's holding that high expectation. And when we started giving them that work, it made it the expectation that all kids, regardless of who they are, should get grade level work. That changed outcomes for our kids. It changed outcomes for our teachers. But I will say that's hard work. And it's hard work for our teachers to make that shift. So we had to have support, but we also had to be honest and make sure that, this is what they invested in, and they want kids to be highly successful. And once we had identified that grade level work, we shifted to the learning targets. And this is work, learning targets have been around for forever. Like really, honestly, if we were being honest with you, they've been around. This is my 20th year in education, and I think they've been around as long as I've been doing this. But I don't know that they've been around in the way that we have started to really unpack them and identify what it is that the students have to learn, how they're going to demonstrate mastery of it, and really make them come alive in our classrooms. This past year, we spent a lot of time students and teacher unpack and deep dive into those learning targets so that the kids know exactly what it is they're supposed to be learning. They know exactly what any new vocabulary means that they might not be familiar with, and they know exactly how they're going to demonstrate mastery and understanding of that work. And when we coupled those two things together, we have seen significant growth throughout our school. Just want to make sure I could talk all day about what we're doing over at Lincoln Heights, and I invite some of you to come.
Nope, they're in purple. I don't even invitate.
And so when we think about what it has also done is it has made sure that our instruction is paced so that there is a set amount of days that we have each day or each year, and we have a set amount of content we have to teach, right? And so making sure that we're tightly aligned to the standards has also allowed us to ensure that we're meeting those expectations. So we're not sending a student to middle school. I heard earlier about middle school. We're not sending a student to middle school that is missing some of the fifth grade curriculum. And my hope, and as we move through this with principals in school buildings, that this happens 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, so when we have 9th graders coming, they have the right content that they need. That would be my hope. That's that. So, that's how we have changed the work we've done. I would be remiss if I didn't share how it has impacted us academically. In 2021, we were at 39.6% proficient. In this past year, at 2024, we are at 71% proficient.
So engaging, thank you. Michelle, I'm sorry.
So I'm Michelle Bell. I am the principal at Riverbend Middle School. I kind of bring a different lens in that I've had experience in the elementary setting and in the middle school setting. I've been at Riverbend 1 year now. Completed my 1 year, starting my 2nd year at Riverbend.
But I have a tale of two stories, because coming from an elementary school where we did this work of Challenge Me, right? But we had to engage the kids with that, because we can do all of that, but if we're not engaging the kids with the high yield strategies where we're turning and talking, where we're doing distributed pairs, where we're having collaborative groups, if we're not doing those things, then it's just a sit and get. And now, you know, middle school kids cannot sit and get. They're not raised like that now, right? So it's about engaging all students, really, at this point. It's engaging all of them. And how do we do that? It's making sure that when they come into that classroom, if my class is 1 hour, I can't have them sitting there for 1 hour. They've got to be moving. That's the generation now. They've got to be moving. And so these high instructional strategies allow my kids to have conversation. You can hear them talk. I've gone into math classes when I was in elementary and now in middle school, and when you see that conversation happening, you see light bulbs going off, right? Just by me turning and talking to someone to explain this concept on the board, the wheels go off. You start to hear, as a teacher, it's a great assessment tool, because I can walk around really quick. Oh, they have it, they don't have it. I might need to reteach this whole concept. So it gives not only the kids access to the curriculum, but it allows me to be able to quickly access. When I go into an ELA classroom and I see the discussion, I went into an 8th grade classroom, blew me away. And my 8th graders, you know, they're a little different because they're 8th graders. But to hear this conversation on this level, they were analyzing poetry. And they had to get into groups and they had to talk about the theme. And they brought out things that, because poetry is not my strong suit, I'm a math person, but they brought out things that I would have never thought about, and you would have never known had they not been having that discussion. And then they had the opportunity to write about it. Well, if we've just talked about it as a pair or in a group, and now I get to write about it, my comprehension level goes up exponentially. Because now I've had this conversation, I've had things cleared up for me, and now I can write about it. We cannot do this without writing. Writing has to be implemented across. And so math teachers don't think that they can do the writing. And so again, going into, I have a teacher that's actually become my math coach this year, going into her classroom and watching kids actually write about math. Writing math stories, explaining how to do the problem. Because if they can explain how to do the problem, they can make a simple mistake and might not get the actual answer, but they know how to do it. A simple multiple choice question does not give you access to that. Really understanding what their knowledge base is. Having supports on the wall. Having the anchor charts. I'm old fashioned. It's an anchor chart, right? The visual supports. But I've seen kids take, when they're taking the end of grade, they look up at the wall. It's not there, but they are visually seeing what was on that wall. All of these help our kids. So at Riverbend, having that 1 year to really assess where we are, because you know when you go in your first year, you got to assess where you are, and seeing pockets of classrooms that were already doing the work, and now being able to use those teachers this year as teacher leaders to show, here's a model classroom. Come in, if you don't understand how this works, come in and observe what this teacher is doing. What it also does is it allows teachers to be more intentional about their teaching. Because if I've got to write my lesson plan and I've got to think about, okay, what questions am I going to ask the kids? How am I going to pair them up? Which strategy am I going to use? Now, I have to be even more intentional because I want to make sure I'm eliciting the answer to make sure that they understand what they're doing. So I've seen the impact. I was at an elementary school where we went from low performing to out of the low performing status by using these strategies. So I absolutely know their work. So we are invested this year in across the school being able to walk in and see that dialogue, that rich conversation, because the conversation is really rich. And sometimes we don't think middle school kids have anything to say, but when you structure the conversation, you teach them the protocols for how to have the dialogue, you really do gain knowledge about what they really know.
All right, I'm Dan Simons. I'm the principal at Buckhorn Creek. I want to say that I think Know Me is wrapped up in all of them. Everyone that you've heard already, right? Whether it be knowing a child, who they are individually, emotionally, personally. I always say to a teacher, I can't teach you to love children, right? And so you've got to know those children in and out in order to teach them. But even academically. And so I will talk a little bit more about the academics as well as some of the social emotional there. But really at Buckhorn Creek, we utilize so many assessments to check where children are at, right? And now you would probably think automatically it's those EOG assessments, those NC check-ins, but really those are our last resort. That is getting the autopsy, not getting the data along the way. And so when I really think about it, right, our teachers are using turn and talks, they're using quick writes, they're using quick draws. They are constantly asking kids to do things throughout the lesson. Scott talked a little bit about those learning targets, right? Well, we are not only getting the learning targets up, it's getting them to be a point of reference throughout the lesson multiple times. So in the middle of the lesson, every 5, 10, 15 minutes, asking the child, how is this work you're doing tying to that? Are you getting there, right? And really, when I can think about one example that has been the most impactful is we end up putting 2 kindergarten classrooms in the same room. So 35 children with 2 teachers, 2 dynamic teachers. And of those 35 kids last year, 11 of them were special ed. 10 of them walked out of the kindergarten. 10 special ed students walked out of kindergarten reading at or above grade level. And so I can tell you that happened because what those 2 teachers did. They didn't wait for that M-class assessment in the middle of the year, right? It was every minute of every day taking notes and noticing what the kids were doing, telling them to turn and talk to their partner during EL and listening into the conversation that we're having about trees, or during Letterland. Wait, no, that sound's not quite right. All right, I'm going to give you a sound. Everybody write on the board. Okay, that child didn't get it. I need to pull that child during the group today and really reinforce that skill. And during that small group, really utilizing that time to hone in on those skills. Even to their intentional use of pairing them with parent volunteers of, I need this child to work on these skills today, let me show you how to do that, now I need you to go do it, right? But being very intentional. But that data doesn't come at that summative assessment, right? It is coming every day, all day long. And I think sometimes what we do so much for students is, right, we look at the academic, but really at Buckhorn, we've really embraced this crew mindset from EL in which we're meeting with kids in circles multiple times a day. But really starting in the morning of just checking in with each child in that circle and how are they doing where they're arriving. I always tell new parents when they're walking through school, you won't see me at carpool in the morning. I'm so sorry to tell you that because I stand right at this intersection of our building because every child has to cross my path to get to class at that intersection. And I love you in carpool. I can wave at you all I want, but checking on every child as they walk past me is more important. And a lot of times I can manage things before they even get to the classroom. But again, that morning circle is important for teachers to have, as well as at the end of the day, we're having closing circles, right? What apologies do you have? What appreciations do you have? Let's really talk about that as well. But that's how we pull that emotional piece in for kids. I can talk about assessments a little bit more, but one thing I do want to point out is I have recently said to new parents, school is not like it used to be, right? I can't give you a packet of work when your child's not here to take home and make up the work. When I walked into a 5th grade classroom this past year, I was blown away because they were doing a fishbowl symposium and debating human rights. And so listening to the conversations what our 5th graders were having and citing evidence from text, citing evidence from the Constitution, citing evidence from all over the place, and the dialogue they were having, I thought I was sitting in a master's class because I couldn't even get engaged in the conversation because they were talking more than I was, which does not happen often. That is just one example. But I can even think of our 1st and 2nd grade teachers as they're teaching Letterland, right? Honestly, going every week over that weekly data, looking at their tri-weekly data, reforming groups, really wrapping back around. We tried something a little different last year where they were intentionally targeting kids based on their data, and we saw huge growth with kids in their Letterland data, right, which translated into M-class data, which hopefully down the road will translate to EOG data, right? It all has an impact. But one thing we cannot do, and I think this is something we do horribly in education and sometimes we don't think of, is we put data in the silo of the teacher. And we have been working hard to put data in the hands of the students. And we have launched student data binders, and I will thank Carter for this because he will always stand out to me. Carter is now in 6th grade, but in 4th grade, his teacher sat down with him, and they were tracking star math, and we were tracking the percentile in which he was performing. And Carter is easily just a brilliant student. He came to us from a school that was not a Wake County school, and he had no belief in himself. And once that teacher got to know him, right, and really got to understand Carter, said, all right, Carter, here's where you're performing. I know you can be at the 95th percentile. I know you can do it. And he did not have a belief that he could do it. And when they had a conversation and she started showing him work he's doing in class, started really showing him on Dreambox what he was doing and what Dreambox was telling me, telling the teacher, he started to believe it. And so finally one day she said, will you have a conversation with him? And I sat down with him with this data folder and I said, Carter, tell me about this. And he talked through it. And I said, well, can't you be up here in 95? And he said, yeah, I'm going to be that guy. I'm going to be that guy that gets 95. And from middle of the way through 4th grade, all the way till he left in, this past spring to go to 6th grade, it was, I'm going to be that guy. And so Carter often stands out to me of what we need to do with children. They all need to be that guy. They all need to be that kid, right? They can all do it. But we have to empower them. And knowing the child helps us empower them.
Wow. So we shared with you the elements of our learning model, and you got a chance to hear how these great practices are already happening in our school district. Our goal is scope and scale, every classroom, every school, and thinking about how do we approach the learning model where every student is seen, challenged, inspired, and known. That's the work ahead, and we're trying to align all of our work to support our educators to continue the excellent work that they're doing, but create a common language across our district so that we're able to train and support our educators in that manner.
I'm going to go back to reminding us, I believe that peer education is probably the best thing you can do to scale. It's very different to hear your peers say how they're implementing this. So, Mr. Hershey, you had comments from the last one, so I'll start with you again, and then we'll go around the table. They'll take notes. Trust me, Drew is still down there taking notes.
So one question from this one, though. When you talk about sharing the data with the student, at what age or grade do you start?
Start in kindergarten. So our kindergarten teachers, we pick a piece of M-Class, right? Because we progress monitor kids all along. And so we talk to them about how their letter lane data impacts their M-Class data and has that trickle-down effect. So let's say, for example, I'm letter naming fluency. Letter naming is important, but the next one is then phoneme segmentation, right? And how are they pulling those sounds apart? And so teachers work with that on Letterland all the time. And so when they're doing their work here, the teacher's having conversation about, now this is going to impact that score, right? And when we do that assessment, they're tracking it. They're filling in a graph. And we put a line of where we want them to get, and then another line of what's our goal for next month, right? And slowly tracking that. And kindergartners know. They know just as well as any of us what they've got to do to get there. And that gives meaning to the work they're doing in class then. So we start that in kindergarten.
Can I just want to also add on that, because I know you had the opportunity to hear from Christy Dickerson earlier. She's a phenomenal teacher over at Lincoln Heights. And she does the exact same thing with her kindergarten classroom. And she takes it one step further by actually at the end of the year doing student-led conferences where the kids use that binder to then share with their parents.
We do the same thing.
From the previous, not questions, but just if you could bring us data, when you mentioned like some of the national data, can you actually provide it, especially relative to the bigger school districts around, just for comparison's sake, and this subgroup data that you had referenced? Also want to highlight, I love the pre-K or the early, see now I have to reference everything, too much information. The Early Education Summit. Can you provide us, not right now, but sometime in the future, when you talked about expanding it, the targets for that? Because I think it's also, the academic piece is fantastic, but we also have to think about winning back students and families. And I think if you start and you're getting into pre-Ks, we went to the closest, we picked pre-K based on the closest to our house, basically, which was a United Methodist, and they were amazing. So getting us starting to have those conversations with them and aligning them with us, you start winning families, that then they're not looking to go somewhere else, they're looking to come straight to us.
We could do that. Ms. Hoffman?
So thank you all for coming out here, and I do look forward to coming to Roseville Middle and seeing some of the exciting clubs that you have going on there. What I'm kind of hearing from everybody at the table that's sitting with us today is like engagement is really equals success for our kids, right? Computers can't do that, but the teachers can. And so I want to thank all of you for, just creative and wonderful ideas that you've had to lead the teachers and work with them to do that for our kids. I think it's really important. And I love what you said about it's like an environment. What you said about the environment, I don't have it exactly, but it's like an environment to inspire them to do that. And that is really something that's going to engage them and keep it going. I know we're speaking to elementary and middle school here, but it really just gives them a different perspective of what school can be. So I just wanted to say thank you for the creative work that you're doing to inspire our kids.
Dr. Ng, anything from you?
Yeah, thank you again so much. It was just very inspiring to hear all the work you guys are doing, and I really, one thing that I got out of it was, if you expect more out of them, they will reach it, right? And like what you were saying, giving them grade level work, not, and expecting them to reach it. And my one question is, if there are some kids in your classes who are above grade level, how do you implement your approach to things?
Sure. So one, I think what has been beneficial for us is we have targeted our students who are above in proficiency through resources like our AIG teacher, who then supports the PLC conversation and how to expand on the standard, and also asking you all for funding for AIG instruction. We've been fortunate to increase from 5 months to 10 months this past going into this year because of that work that we've done to support beginning in kindergarten, K2, supporting with Nurturing, thank you. Yes, I'm losing that.
It's after 5, no worries.
And it's summertime still, we've got a few more days. With nurturing and then supporting them 3-5. Thank you.
Just thank you all. This work is not easy, but we can hear your passion and your love of it, and I hope that translates. Well, I can tell that translates to your classrooms and your students. And I just wrote, it's Maslow's, Bloom's, and student voice and choice. And it all comes back to those things. So thank you.
Just thank you and come back.
Thank you. I echo my colleagues' sentiments. Thank you, and thank you for staff for staying after 5. Again, this is our core business, and so I appreciate my board members for staying. I do also think it's important for them to hear the great work that's happening, and without fail, I'm always going to say thank you, Dr. Wilson-Norman, for knowing my question is always going to be, I need to hear you tell me you're going to scale it. Right? That's constantly what I'm going to be reminded of, because again, that's the only way we're going to see the original data in those subgroups really transition, is when we're scaling it across schools. And I think about my transient kids, that it doesn't matter which school they're at, they should still be able to get the exact same level of education and engagement. And the last thing I'll say for parents, because it's what I hear the most, is, and I can't remember who said, I think maybe you, Ms. Cooper, but parents tell me all the time, when I call the principal and I say, this student, oftentimes their second student at the school, isn't going to do well with this teacher because they're not going to be able to learn from a teacher that they already are having some kind of tension with. And inevitably, principals like, well, I'm not going to change classes. And we all understand why, but I think you said it best. We cannot learn from people we don't feel connected to, especially if that disconnect is, I don't think you see me. And so that's important for me in all of your professional development that you're going to do as we start to scale this, is there has to be a commitment to the flexibility of changing the environment for all of our students, and recognizing that is not a flat line, right? They're not going to be able to use this learning model without recognizing that all of their students are actually very different regardless of what they're seeing on the surface. And so I appreciate the commitment of digging deep and investing in our students in a way that I think is the only way that all of our students have the ability to be successful. Thank you again to your entire team for really being an investment, digging into our schools, helping those of you who are leaders in your school really do this work, and hopefully you'll continue to share with your colleagues. Because again, education, that is our core business. So thank you all very much. And Dr. Taylor, it goes without saying, you know what I say to you all the time, it's got to be a culture change in all nearly 200 buildings.
And I know they've done a great job, and I won't say much more, but I can tell you I'm super excited about the work that Dr. Wilson and her team are doing. People know how deeply I feel about instructional leadership, but the easy part for me is that she's put in a structure and a system that creates that consistency across the board. And when we think about regional support teams are going to be involved in this, how we make sure that all principals know and understand that we don't just leave it to chance. That is the thing about instructional leadership, is teaching our principals how to go into buildings and to create these structures and add longevity to those structures. That's what this work is all about. And so it's great to just be able to sit back and plug this in and watch it. Hats off to you guys.
Thank you all, everybody, and all of you that attended as well. We know that this doesn't just happen by those at the table. So thank you all for all of your investment. And thank you, board members, for hanging in there. Yes. I know Chris and I are like, he keeps saying, please don't actually look at the bus. Two middle school and high school principals are killing me. I might have to look at that.